So in today's video, we're going to talk about how skill-based matchmaking impacts your overall gaming experience, whether it impacts your overall ping, how long it takes for you to get into a lobby, and the quality of players that you go up against. One thing I will point out is personally, I think skill-based matchmaking sucks, and there's only two exceptions in my opinion. One is a ranked playlist, which a lot of games do, where they separate that out from the casual playlist. And then the other one is a protected bracket of the lowest skilled players, separated from pretty much everyone else. Obviously, the average population should definitely mix with medium skilled players, top skilled players, and all in between, so that people can kind of experience the game and have a little bit of variety and don't necessarily have to use one item. This video is in collaboration with Drifter and TheXclusiveAce. We kind of pulled all of our data. Sour also chipped in a little bit in terms of data. We're going to kind of talk about the results. All the links to their channels will be linked down below, as well as a spreadsheet kind of going over all the different stuff that we gathered as we go through these various bullet points. If you want to skip to a certain section, that'll also be available on the timeline as well as in the description with timestamps. Enjoy the video, learn something new. Please do me a favor, hit that like button. If you're brand new, want to find your way back for more Call of Duty content, make sure you subscribe with notifications on. So to go ahead and start off there, what is skill-based matchmaking, or some people are kind of referring it to as now as performance-based matchmaking, because obviously if you do bad in a couple matches, maybe you get put into an easier lobby, so your performance will improve. You have a couple good matches and then it puts you into a higher bracket. So this could be very fluid based off your previous performance. And personally, I'm not a fan of it, because I think that the only thing that matters with matchmaking, with the exception of a ranked playlist or that protected bracket, is ping. Ping should be key. And unfortunately, in this particular case, ping is not key in my opinion. So pretty much how it seemed like Call of Duty used to do it. Obviously, there was some kind of skill-based matchmaking, even though it was very weak, and it kind of only had that protected bracket. At least it felt like that if you played any Call of Duty from BO4 backwards, with the exception of maybe AW. One of the things that we'll look at is normally you would just ping up. It would automatically throw players in a lobby, randomized, because you could be low skill, high skill, it doesn't matter, it just depends on where you fit. And then it would kind of pair off the lobby and balance the lobby out so the teams would be at least relatively close by the time the end of the match happened, which is the overall goal. Kind of make it even so that one team isn't stacked and another one's thrown off. Obviously, if people are playing in a full 6-man party, it's going to throw things a little bit out of whack, and you can expect to have some issues with matchmaking, because obviously they're not going to find a perfect 6 stack at the same time. Randomized, that's going to be as good as a fully stacked team. So there's a lot of issues that are kind of out of control, especially when you allow parties into the mix. We're pretty much focusing on queuing up as a solo player. So to give a little bit of insight on the methodology and how we actually did a lot of this testing, pretty much I tested a couple accounts. One was my true account, my own account, which has about a 2 KD. And the second account I tested was actually my nephew, which has about a 0.7 KD, but like a 0.8 something EKIA. So obviously the game, it counts assists plus kills for that EKIA, focusing primarily on kills, death ratio, score per minute, that type of stuff. So what we noticed is literally the ping was more. Obviously, depending on who tested which accounts, Drifter tested a pro level account, his own account. He also tested a very low KD account. Same thing with TheXclusiveAce. He tested a low KD account, low score per minute, tested an average player right around 1, and then he tested his own account. And we saw consistency across the board, where it was taking longer to get into a match. And when you did, and when you were in the match, you experienced a higher ping on average. So the difference in ping with my two accounts was 24 ping versus 32 ping, which is relatively close, but there's still a distinct difference. And as we saw the other accounts that everyone tested, we saw a similar trend. As the KD and the score per minute, win-loss, and all those types of variables started to increase, it was very consistent when you actually looked at the accounts that there was a trend that if you had higher stats, it was going to take you longer to get into a match and you were going to have higher ping, which is pretty unfortunate, because even going back to World War II with all that type of stuff, they were like, ping is key, ping is key. People were complaining about it then. And then as last year happened, they did their skill-based matchmaking test and they didn't really find a correlation. It didn't seem like it took particularly longer or that you had higher ping. So it was pretty consistent across the 9 accounts that were tested. If we tested the one account that was lower, it had better ping and faster queue times. Opposite for the higher account, higher ping and longer queue times, which is very unfortunate in my opinion, because then that leads to other issues. In my particular case, I already had very low ping. So if we were in the 24 ping on the low account, the bullet reg and all that stuff felt great. I didn't really have any lag comp issues. And then on my normal account, I really didn't have those issues either as we went into a little bit higher ping. But at the end of the day, 30 ping is not incredibly high, especially when we start factoring how the ping worked in Exclusive Ace's lobbies, where he's a little bit further from the servers. So he saw more drastic differences between the low ping and the high ping lobbies, or the low skill and the high skill lobbies. So in his particular case, since he's a little bit further from a server, this can become particularly important for different people where maybe your region's not supported as much. You're definitely going to have more connection issues based on this data. Obviously, we only pulled 9 accounts, so obviously the accuracy of this data could be expanded significantly further. We could play 100 matches instead of 10. We could test 1,000 accounts instead of the 9 we tested. But it just doesn't seem sensible for the manpower that we had to put this together. But in his particular case, he's going from 50 ping up to over 80 ping, and wait times of about 20 seconds all the way up to 46 seconds, literally doubling in those specific scenarios, or almost doubling when it comes to ping. So that's a significant difference in my opinion. I think that's definitely an issue that we should be talking about when it comes to skill-based matchmaking. We should be prioritizing connection because before it wasn't impacting it. So whatever they've done, whether it's because Cold War is less popular or whatever, maybe there's less players, so that's now it's a bigger issue. So obviously this is one that I would love to see with the larger sample size, but on the small scale, there's a decent correlation between your skill and how much ping, as well as how long it takes for you to queue into a lobby. So we saw the same correlation when you factor in KD and score per minute. Generally, as your KD and score per minute improve, you'd see an increase of those types of players in the lobby. It's not so drastic though. So skill-based matchmaking isn't necessarily as tight as sometimes people want to make it assume, but it does feel that way as we get to some of these other parts. In particular, when I played all of my matches out, you're talking about having about 110 players that it went up against. Out of those 110 players, the average KD was 1.24 for my lobbies, which I had a 1.93 KD. So when you're factoring that into the case, obviously not everyone in the lobby is a 1.93, and out of all those matches, there wasn't a single player that had a better KD than me, better score per minute, or better accuracy. So I was always the best player in the lobby, which kind of sucks in one regard, which I'm going to get to here, which is the lobby balancing. It was almost always a case where the teams that we were going against were a little bit better than our team, because obviously if it's trying to balance the team based off KD, and if I have the highest, that means I am likely to get some of the worst players in the lobby. Even if they're all an average of 1.24, there's some that are going to be 1.5, and there's some that are going to be 1.1. I'm going to be more likely to get the 1.1 players, because when you average out that KD, it's going to be quote unquote balanced, but sometimes the KD isn't a true measurement of how good a player is. If I wanted to boost my KD to 4, I could literally just camp, but then maybe I'd have a terrible score per minute. Maybe not in this game, because obviously the way the score per minute works, if you go on a 5 streak, you literally double your score per minute compared to only going on 4s, which is kind of ridiculous. You go on a 6 or 7 streak, you go all the way up to a 10, you're like quadrupling your score per minute for that match just because you went on a 10 versus just going on a couple 4s. But there was definitely a correlation, whereas if I was playing on the lower account that had the 0.7-ish KD, their lobbies were still an average of about 1, because they're kind of just thrown into the average pool. They're probably on the bottom end of that. They're not necessarily put in that protected bracket, which would probably be like 0.3 players and below. I don't know the exact number because we weren't looking for a protected bracket. We're just kind of seeing what the majority of the player base is dealing with, which is kind of an average lobby of probably between 0.7, 1.1, somewhere in there, based off looking at the lower skilled accounts. That's kind of where a majority of the players will sit. Obviously with the higher skill counts, the game doesn't look like it's going out of its way to quadruple your wait time to guarantee that everyone in your lobby has a 1.7 KD. It's just not necessarily practical, because you'd probably be waiting a very long time as you get into those higher percentiles of KD, score per minute, win-loss. And when looking at all the data, one of the strongest correlations was win-loss. As your win-loss increases, it stacks you up against other players that have higher win-losses. And this was one of our strongest correlations as we went through all the different data. The higher your win-loss, the more likely you are to go against other players that have higher win-loss, even stronger than we saw with KD, as well as score per minute. So that could be a major factor in determining like play style. Obviously, if somebody's playing the objective very hard. And if you're playing TDM, obviously you're going for kills, deaths. If you're playing Dom, you're going for the hill and you're winning because you're double capping, you're capping out the time. Maybe you're going for time and hardpoint. It's going to be that I think is pretty interesting. And I would love to spend more time on that in the future. If we had a larger sample size, maybe we had a Discord where hundreds of people were submitting data and then we can actually gather it, work as a team. That'd be a perfect world, but I don't necessarily see that happening. But that seems like a very intuitive thing where, hey, you know what? If they're winning more, that means those types of players tend to play the objective more depending on what game mode they're in. So I think that definitely ends up playing a factor. And it's not 100% just KD as a locked-in factor, because what happened is when I was looking through my data and I was looking at the lower skilled accounts, people that were going against, most of the people were around that 1, but there was one guy who actually had a 3.5 KD or something. It was absolutely absurd. And I was like, man, this dude's got to be a god or something, right? But then I go look at their score per minute and the number of kills and eliminations they get per match. Their average elims per match was 9. So that means they normally go 9-3 every match. That's their entire match, regardless of what mode they play in. They go 9-3, which basically tells me they are camping, and they brought down their score per minute quite a bit because they're not getting as many engagements. So that might even be a bigger determining factor. Obviously, like I said, we could find out more with a larger sample size than the matches we played, because that was a one-off. And then obviously with reverse boosting being a huge thing, and several YouTubers coming out and saying, hey, yeah, I reverse boost, I do it all the time for gameplay or for entertaining my audience. That's what they want to see. They don't want to see me go 30 and 15. You know, everyone has different opinions on that topic, but if they're RBing, doesn't necessarily mean they're getting in the protected bracket. They could just be getting into the average bracket and make it feel a little bit more like COD. And if somebody has like a legit 3 or 4 KD and they're going up against people that have a 1 KD, they're probably going to smack that lobby. As you go up and maybe a 1.24. So now let me go ahead and give my thoughts a little bit on this, as well as some of the other things that I found a little bit funny as we went through this data. Obviously, some of the issues with this is if you matchmake with friends, somebody's going to have a bad experience just because of skill-based matchmaking. If I play with a lower skilled person, they might be pumped into a higher bracket where they're just going to get destroyed by the entire lobby. Whereas previous Call of Duties, some people were good, some people were bad, so they would probably do average if they were an average player. And then the opposite could be said if I end up matchmaking with a buddy that is lower skilled and maybe they decide to put us in a lower bracket, just slightly lower. I'm going to go in and dominate the lobby, right? Because that's just how it is. And it's unfortunate because then now, like, I have an amazing experience, but those people have a terrible experience versus letting it be random. And sometimes I'll get good lobbies, sometimes I'll get bad, and it'll be whatever. I think ping should be key. Queue times are very important to get people in matches as fast as possible. We should have a ranked mode. We should have a protected bracket. Those are all things that I don't think anyone necessarily disagrees with, except for Activision, who is kind of money hungry, really trying to drive player count, player engagement, which leads to overall more microtransactions. That's the goal. It's about money. That's one argument for it, but it is what it is. Unfortunately, when you want to play with friends, it gets incredibly difficult. I had a full comment thread going on of people saying they can't play with their friends anymore. Maybe when they're friends, and maybe when they improve, they'll be able to play with their friends again, because they're getting stomped when they play with their friends and it's not an enjoyable experience, which is pretty unfortunate. And then another thing that's kind of come up is the hit registration. That could be a connectivity issue, right? Maybe something wrong with their servers. Treyarch is notoriously known for having worse connectivity and worse registration compared to Infinity Ward games. Those are normally crisp. To tack onto that, the issue's kind of arisen primarily for PC keyboard and mouse players. They're coming out saying something is really wonky with the hit registration, specifically with keyboard and mouse. I personally didn't experience it. I know Drifter said he experienced it on keyboard and mouse. I know Nate Gibson, one of the biggest guys on keyboard and mouse when it comes to Call of Duty, very reputable, been playing Call of Duty since the beginning, kind of has an idea that, hey, you know what, something doesn't feel right. And a lot of other people have been very outspoken that are playing on keyboard and mouse that something is wrong with the connection. Personally, I don't think that's a skill-based matchmaking feature or issue. I think that's just something wrong with the connectivity and connection. I hope that's at least a problem, because then that's fixable and it's not kind of hidden underlying. Like I said, I haven't experienced it, but there's enough people talking about it that clearly something is going on with keyboard and mouse and connectivity when you're trying to hit targets. And this other one is a little bit funny. For whatever reason, when you're playing on the higher bracket, pretty much you primarily run into PlayStation people, but most of all, you're obviously going to run into PC players. When you play in the lower bracket, for whatever reason, Xbox players come out of the woodwork. I know that most people don't want to hear that. They're in disbelief, whatever they're going to argue. That's not a console war. That's just straight facts. Literally, if we look at the data for all the accounts collected, if they were a lower tier account that we were looking at, there was more Xbox players, and it was a higher tier. Then we ran into PS4 and PC being the dominant, and Xbox was near non-existent on some of the scenarios. It was just kind of a funny little stat that I looked at. So obviously there could be good players on all platforms as well as bad players on all platforms. I just thought that was kind of funny. So my last thought is, from my perspective, I think skill-based matchmaking needs to be done away with the exception of the two things I talked about, which were a ranked playlist and the protected bracket. Beyond that, just let people play. If they want to improve, they can improve. If they like the game, they should keep playing. If they're good, they should be rewarded for that with kill streaks, all that type of stuff. At the end of the day, I think that's what the fun element is, learning to improve against people that you know could be better, could be worse, versus knowing that, hey, you know what, did I have a good lobby because I'm playing well? Or is it just because the game felt sorry for me and they wanted to throw me into a lower bracket, kind of bump that ego a little bit? You know, I'd really like to know. And unfortunately, with the way the current setup is, you don't really know. And that's sad. Hopefully you guys did enjoy the video, learned something new. Go ahead and check out their videos. I'm sure they're going to talk about some of these things a little bit differently. Again, all linked down in the description. Appreciate the support on the channel. Thank you for watching. As always, have a great day.